Nimai, let me see you on the video. You can sit here, okay? I want to focus the video. I'll show you. Sit in that chair. There you are, Nimai. Wow. You're on Facebook Live. Nimai, are you going to give class tonight?
No.
Why not?
Because.
Okay.
Because why?
But I think you're a really good speaker. And I think you know Bhagavad Gita verses, right?
Yeah.
Which one do you know? Which one do you know? Can you tell one? You know that? Yeah. Do you know the one Janma Karma?
Yes.
Say that.
Janma Karma
Chame.
Divyam.
Yeah. Evam Yoveti.
Vetitattvataha.
Yeah, so good. Tyaktva.
Deham Punarjanma.
Naiti. Mam Eti. Sorjuna. Wow, Nimai. Hare Krishna. Okay, now I'm going to sit in the seat. And so to all of our Facebook devotees who are tuning in, that was Nimai Das. And Nimai Das is a really good devotee here in New Braj. He goes to the school here with the New Braj kids. And he was born in this life to become a devotee of Krishna. Probably in his last life he did some very big service for Krishna. And now he's a little boy again. And he's growing up and learning how to be an excellent devotee. He's going to preach to the whole world about Krishna because he's learning Bhagavad Gita. Because Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. Yes. And because Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, he taught us all knowledge. So here we are in New Braj, and we're embarking upon for the next month or two, or however long it takes, we're going to be studying the Jaiva Dharma of Srila Sachidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Yesterday we had a discussion about what we should read and study, and we went over a number of options, but we came to the conclusion that it would be very fruitful for us to study the Jaiva Dharma. And especially for me, it would be very, very beneficial to deeply penetrate into the presentation of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Today I was also discussing with Yuvati Didi about Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's poem. It's a very famous English poem that he wrote in the 1870s. Yeah, alas for those who spend their days in festive mirth and joy. That poem is actually titled Saragrahi Vaishnava. You know what Saragrahi means? Sar means essence, and Grahi means one who takes the essence. So the Vaishnavas, they live in this world, but they're not of this world. They're transcending this world, and they're going towards the eternal spiritual world. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote that English poem. He didn't mention the name of Krishna and so forth. He was writing this for the Western educated persons, or any persons in the West who come from a background of, Judeo-Christian, they believe in God. But he was actually, in this poem, he's describing how a jiva soul goes through the very difficult frustration of this world and becomes entangled in various sinful activities and trying to enjoy material life and material sense gratification, but only to feel enveloped by darkness. But Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is pointing out that deep inside everyone's heart there is a voice. A voice so deep and soft, he says. What is the voice telling to everyone? Man, man, thou art immortal soul. Thee death can never melt. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also, he appeals to the common sense that we've been endowed with. He says, man's glory lies in common sense, dictating us the grace. That man is made to live and love the beauteous heaven's embrace. Yes. So in this way, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is guiding anyone. He's not only telling this for the followers of the Vedic civilization, but for all people. Because within every jiva, there is the desire. There is the desire to have eternal happiness, eternal love, eternal perfection, because that is our eternal nature. But it's covered. So that poem is a wake-up, a suggestion to the jivas to wake up. And it's written in the older English poetical language style, very charming. And so I was reading that to Yulati Didi because she also wants to do a certain kind of seva, a certain kind of service for the preaching mission of Lord Chaitanya to attract the souls in this world. And Krishna equips each one of us with certain talents and abilities and qualities. So there are many ways of preaching, but the main principle is to attract people to come and hear, so that they come and hear. After all, we know that the first time that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur spoke to his disciples in the early 1930s or somewhere around then, of his desire to now begin preaching in the Western world. At that time, he also stated something that, in fact, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, he himself told about how this affected him when he heard that. That Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said that, yes, we will open up student hostel in order to attract the younger persons. We'll open up a student hostel, and we will even, if necessary, to attract them to come and to hear, we will also feed them meat and eggs, if necessary, he said. Because if they come and they hear, then gradually they will change, they'll become purified, and then they will accept. Our Srila Prabhupada, when he came to the West, he also didn't know what the conditions would be, what kind of foods would be available and so forth. But he also had, he followed the same, the same ideology for preaching as his Guru Maharaj. He came to New York City. Whoever would come, he would encourage them to come and just to hear. And he himself would perform kirtan so that they would hear. Gradually, what happened? Some younger persons, they started to attend his classes. Mukunda Maharaj has written his book, Miracle on 2nd Avenue. Oh, wait, what's the title again? Maybe it's that. Miracle on 2nd Avenue. Anyway, yeah, and he told the story how Swamiji was living in some loft, and he was advertising that he would give Sanskrit classes. So some interested people came. And Mukunda was one of them. And he also was expressing that, you know, he was interested to learn Sanskrit. So what was Prabhupada's Sanskrit class? He would chant a verse from Brahma Samhita, you know, like Chintamani Prakara Sadmasu Kalpa Briksha. He would have them repeat the words like this. He'd have it written up there on some kind of board. But then he would talk about the meaning of the verse. And so Mukunda was thinking, this is not exactly learning Sanskrit. And gradually he came and helped. And in course of time, we know the history of how the young people helped Srila Prabhupada to move into a location that would be his own rented location of a storefront where people could come right off the streets. Because before that, he was just in some building, some office that he was renting. It didn't even have a bath in it. And then he went into the loft, that was kind of lofts. There was a bunch of hippies who were coming and going. That's a whole story. But Srila Prabhupada's principle was that let them come and hear. Because by hearing, they'll be purified. By hearing, they'll become purified, and they'll take up the process of chanting the holy names. And Srila Prabhupada provided that atmosphere, and in fact he provided even a living facility, very basic, for his first disciples. He also provided wonderful Krishna Prasadam. So what a dose they were getting, and because of the pure devotee doing this, they became purified very rapidly. And then they began to embrace the process of bhakti, of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada was teaching them Bhagavad Gita. He was teaching them even Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was teaching them some, because he had the Srimad Bhagavatam that he had brought, so I was also teaching from that. We have his lectures, they were recorded, his early lectures. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, such a personality, he's the first one, he's the pioneer. He's the one who wrote the book in English language. It was really the first book from any of our acharyas. He wrote it in English language. And the title of that book is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and His Precepts. And there's two parts to that book. The first part is about his life. He tells about this historical personality named Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared in West Bengal, India, Navadvip, in such and such a year, when the full moon, he appeared on the evening of the full moon, and so forth. So he's telling some overview of his life. Who is this personality? Nobody had heard of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the West. And he actually referred to him as the Eastern Savior. Like Jesus Christ was known, as a Savior, a Messiah, like this. So he also utilized and had respect for the Judeo-Christian culture. And he likened the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to that of the teachings of Jesus, but especially his life. And he also was told how he performed some miracles, like Jesus did some miracles. And then the second part of the book is his precepts. And interestingly enough, because we're about to start studying Jaiva Dharma, the precept portion is the 10 philosophical principles. of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's actually what he gave, he presented as the precepts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's called Das Mool Tattva. And in the Jaiva Dharma, you have one entire chapter for each one of these separate principles. Das Mool, 10 root principles of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy. That's how he presented the philosophy. So, I was just looking today at the book that we were reading prior to Kartik. We were reading the book of Srila Bhaktivinoda. Well, it was actually Upadeshamrita of Gurudev, but in the last part of the book, there's an entire book included of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's, which we were reading, and it's the 12 essays that were written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur on 2 verses of Upadeshamrita. What are those 2 verses? Verses 2 and verse 3. Verse 2 is the 6 principles that will cause bhakti to diminish, to be destroyed. Atyahara prayashascha, prajalpa niyamagraha, jana sangascha, laulyamcha, shadvir bhakti vinashyati. And the next verse, the 3rd verse of Upadeshamrita, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in these 2 verses, he wrote an entire essay for each one of the principles. Atyahara, prayasha, prajalpa, like this. And also for the 3rd verse, there are 6 principles that are favorable for developing bhakti. Utsahan, nishchayat, dhairyat, tatat karma pravartana, sangatyaga, satovrite, shadbir bhakti, prasidyati. Prasidyati means bhakti will be increased, enhanced, prasidyati. So I was looking at that, where we left off. And guess where we left off? We left off on the 3rd principle, Utsahan, Nishchayat, then Dharyat. I started looking at it. And there he presents the Das Mool. So I thought, we cannot proceed forward without completing Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So I began to read the rest of that. It's unbelievable what is there. So I think as a prelude to our study of the Jaiva Dharma, we will respect Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur by not leaving it hanging, what we were studying, but completing that properly. And it will be so beneficial for our study of Jaiva Dharma. Because I was looking ahead. It's so amazing how he's teaching us how to apply these principles in our life. Really. So that's what I've decided to do. If there's an agreement from the devotees. We've got time. We don't know how much, but we've got time.
It's happy to hear you speak, whatever you decide.
Yeah, but I think that this was, the Jaiva Dharma, it's going to be like one of the most wonderful periods of time that I've spent, sharing with the devotees. Because I've never given class on Jaiva Dharma. I've read a little bit here and there. I also want to record it. I'm looking at Yuvati because she has knowledge of all of these things, recording and so forth. But I want to record those classes completely. Audio recording, maybe video recording also, so that this can be presented. And devotees can learn these classes. Not just Facebook Live. Because Facebook Live, there's only a few people and who knows who's going to... But this will be an actual course in the Jaiva Dharma. Yeah.
We can maybe put it on like SoundCloud, like a public, something public,
Yes.
For the audio, like a podcast format.
Yeah. The way I'm thinking about it is, the way that as you see, what I like to do, I don't just like to read and read. That's a different thing. That's an audio book. We already have very wonderful audio books recorded by Sripad Bhaktivedanta Tridandi Maharaj. He's dedicated himself to reading. He's got a very good voice for reading, and he's, recorded quite a few of Srila Gurudev's books. It's a very valuable contribution. There are other devotees who have also done audio books. But but this, what I want to do is I want to do a course. And this course, it doesn't have to be live. It can just be some place where people can download the course and study by hearing explanations and in-depth classes on the Jaiva Dharma, all the philosophical principles presented throughout the entire Jaiva Dharma. There's one other devotee, our godbrother in Canada, Jnana Shakti Prabhu. Have you seen any of his? Or
No, I heard he was doing.
Yeah, he's done a course also. I don't know how he's done it. I haven't looked at it yet, but I think he was doing a similar thing, actually putting together a course because Gurudev had encouraged him in that direction with Jaiva Dharma. And you also told the other day,
He told me to
he
study
told
it
you to
and
study
teach it.
Jaiva Dharma. Yeah.
And teach it.
You
That's
know
why I
what-
want to hear from you so I can teach it.
And you know what he also told me? I was telling the story to Vaikanas Maharaj the other day of the time in Malaysia in 1990, end of 96, just the very end of 96 after Kartik. And he was going to the eastern countries for the first time, stopping in Malaysia first. Flying from India to Malaysia, then he went to Australia, then back to Bali, and then finally Singapore. 4 places he visited, like almost 2 months of preaching. But the very first day that he flew, we picked him up at the airport and then drove him to the house that he would be staying in. And we had a slight evening program of introducing him. He asked me to introduce him and to speak, and he spoke a few words, but not long. And then the next morning, he went for his morning walk in the park. And after walking a little, then he sat down on a park bench. It was right next to the house, small park. So he just like circle, walking a couple times around. And then first words out of his mouth, and I'm sitting pretty much right in front of him on the grass, you know. So, Urkram Prabhu, are you preparing yourself for the renounced order of life? And I was taken back. So that's a whole story. I'm not telling it in detail. But then he told me, he said, do you know Das Mul? At that time, his book was not available. It was 1996. His book didn't actually get printed until about the year 2000, I think, or 99, 2000. But I had read another version from Gaudiya Math, printed by Gaudiya Math. This is a Yati Maharaj, translated into English. And I'd read that. So I was familiar with the term Das Mul, 10 essential principles. And so then I said, well, yes, Gurudev, I have read the Jaiva Dharma. I've read about Das Mul. He says, do you know the shloka? And I said, no. Then he had one of his secretaries traveling with him tell the shloka. Then he recited the shloka, Amnaya Praha Tattvam Haririha Paramam Sarvashaktim Rasabdin. The one shloka composed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur telling the 10 essential principles. Right? Amnaya. And so, Praman, what is the proof? What is the evidence? Praman. It's called Amnaya. And then the other 9 principles are proved by that. So then he told me, if you want to preach, because he's telling me, I want you to take sannyas and all of it. If you want to preach, you must preach Das Mul. That was his instruction. And I understood that because, as I just explained, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's first presentation to the Western world in English is Das Mul, the 10 principles. How important this is for us. And when you examine what are these 10 principles, you will see how it far surpasses any other philosophical conception ever presented in this world. It's coming directly from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So our study of Jaiva Dharma should be available, recorded properly as a course, you know. I don't know exactly what's the best way, what's the best app, what's the best technology, this or that, but we've got all the technology, you know, we can do it. We can do it. If we can do Facebook Live, we can certainly do any kind that is necessary. I know that Vaikanas Maharaj has that program, which is only audio, but it's live. The one that he speaks to the devotees in the morning, and they tune in on their computers or phones, and they can hear the audio. And I forget what it's called.
Cloud?
No, no.
Oh, I know.
It's a kind of strange name.
Yeah, it's a strange name.
Yeah.
It slips my mind.
You know Jai Govinda Prabhu? You know that app that Vaikanas Maharaj uses?
No, I think it's not really Mars. But there's one that is called Audible.
Oh, that's another one.
Yeah.
Audible. Okay.
Audible.
Yeah, anyway, I'm just telling, like Vaikanas Maharaj, he uses that app, and it takes, I think, one of the good things is it doesn't take so much megabytes or gigabytes, you know.
Does it save the recording of it too?
No, that's the thing. It doesn't save the recording, you see. So, I mean, we can have two different devices. We can have one device recording it live, and we can have another device recording it audio, or going direct into some, whatever, cloud or this or that. So, we have to think about it, and we'll come up with the best option for that. But I think it's good if this is a video. We can have both, we can have the audio, but I think to not have the video will be not as, how do you say, as beneficial.
You can distribute it audio and then have the video also as,
Yeah,
you know,
that's what I'm saying, we can do both.
People can pick which option they want to do.
Sure, right. But whatever is recorded live, audio and video, together, separately, both ways, but that's what I wanted to do. So, because, you know, I've given a lot of classes over the years. There was one devotee traveled with me in Russia for a few years. There's stacks of classes and lectures that I've given in traveling here and there. But the thing is, it's not on one subject, because when you're just a traveling preacher, you don't have the luxury of doing a constant one study course, you know, with the same audience especially, you know. You don't have that luxury. You have to preach according to the audience and according to the Kaladesha Patra and all of that. Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai Jai. Jai Jai Shri Radha. So, that's what I wanted to do. And so, we're going to read this section.
Doria?
Yeah, we're going to read that. Gurve Gaurachandraya Radhikaye Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadbhaktaya Namo Namaha. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jayatam Shuruto Pangor Mama Mandamatergati Matsarva Svapadam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadha Shrimad Ratnagar Singhasanasto Shrimad Radha I need some water. Shrimad Radha Srila Govinda Devo Prestal Bhi Sevyamano Smarami Shriman Rasarasaram Vam Shivata Tatakstitaha I ate a pear before. Something stuck.
It's stuck in the throat.
Shriman Rasarasaram Vam Shivata Tatakstitaha Karshan Venu Sunaira Gopir Gopinata Shriyestunaha Vrindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nitya Lila Pravishta, Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Ashtatarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, who brought Krishna consciousness and the movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the whole world. Then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nitya Lila Pravishta, Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, and Nitya Lila Pravishta, Om Vishnupad Paramahansa, Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. Then I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat pranams to the lotus feet of all of my Sri Rupanuga Gauriya Guru Varga, and my Dandavat pranams to all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis. So, this is chapter, no, this is the other. We read Nishchayat already. chapter 3, Dhiṛya. Everyone can say Dhiṛya.
Dharya.
Dhiṛya. 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 Dhiṛya means patience and forbearance. Forbearance. This is the third quality required for bhakti. Utsahan is the first, enthusiasm. Second one, nishchayat, firm conviction. Third, dharyat. This is a very important quality because without patience and forbearance, it will never be possible to continue, to persevere, and to strive unwaveringly towards the goal. So Rupa Goswami has written this. This is necessary quality. Now we're reading Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's explanation. The necessity of patience in bhajan. It is extremely necessary for those engaged in bhajan to possess the quality of patience and forbearance, dhairya. Those who possess this quality, they are known as dhira, sober. So, you know, we've heard these two words, but I did not hear until now, that quality, how is a person dhira? We know that the word dhira means sober. And that's given in the first verse of Upadeshamrita. Vacho vegam, manasakrodha vegam, jiva vegam, udaropasta vegam, etan vegan yo vishaheta dhira. Those persons who are dhira, sober, they possess this quality. So dhira and dhairya are connected in the Sanskrit etymology. Dhira and dhairya. Those who possess this quality of dhairya are known as dhira, sober. No one can attain success without becoming dhira. So, let's hear about this. In the absence of patience, a person becomes restless. What is the word for restless? Adhira. The opposite of restless is sober. So in the absence of patience, a person becomes restless or adhira and is therefore unable to perform any task. By the quality of patience, a sadhaka first controls himself and eventually the whole world. Now, controlling the 6 kinds of urges, this section is, controlling the 6 kinds of urges is dhairya. You know the first verse of Upadeshamrita, you haven't memorized it yet, but some have. But the first verse of Upadeshamrita is telling about the 6, what? Urges. Urges. And any conditioned soul in this world is always being pushed by these urges. That's why sometimes Srila Prabhupada referred to the urges as pushings, the 6 pushings. What are the 6 pushings? Vachavegam, the urge to speak, speaking. Manasavegam, the actions of the mind, the urge, the pushing of the mind. Krodhavegam, the urges of anger. Jivavegam, jiva means tongue. Jiva. The urges of the tongue. Udara, is like we've been studying the Damodar Astakam. Do you know where the word Damodar comes from? the word, it comes from two words, Dhamma and Udara. Dhamma and Udara combine together and become Damodara. Dhamma means rope, and Udara means belly. So Krishna being tied up around the belly by the rope that Mother Yashoda tied him with, he receives the name Damodara. So Udara Veda, Udara Vega is the urges of the belly. And finally, Upasta Vegam means the genital. Upasta Vegam. And these three are in a straight line, Srila Prabhupada described. The tongue, belly, genital. If you control the tongue, then you control the other. So he's quoting this first verse, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Sarvam api mam prativim sashishyat. Etan vegan yo vishaheta dira. A wise and self-controlled, self-composed person who can subdue the impetus to speak, the agitation of the mind, the onset of anger, the vehemence of the tongue, the urge of the belly, and the agitation of the genitals can instruct the entire world. In other words, all persons, they may become disciples of such a self-controlled person. Now he breaks these down. The 6 urges are the urges of speech, the mind, anger, the belly, the tongue, and the genitals. Now he says the urge of speech and the means to control it. Just see how Bhaktivinoda Thakur is giving us all necessary knowledge. It's one thing to hear about that you have this, you have to control this, but it's another thing, what's the method? What are the means of controlling? Okay. Here he says, when the desire arises to speak excessively, a person becomes talkative. I could mention certain names, I'm not going to, but when the desire arises to speak excessively, a person becomes talkative. Talkative, talk. And when a person is incapable of controlling his speech, he speaks about others. Paracharcha means to speak about others. When a person is incapable of controlling his speech, he speaks about others. Speaking about others causes many people to become your enemy. Is that not logical? When you speak about others, it causes them to become your enemy. Although it is extremely foolish to make statements that are useless and unnecessary, a materialist always wastes his time by doing so. It is foolish. Not just foolish, it's extremely foolish to make statements that are useless and that are unnecessary. But a materialist always wastes his time by doing so. The result is great distress. What's the result?
Great distress.
Yes. To check oneself from this disturbance, one who is a follower of Dharma observes a vow of silence. Mauna Vrata. This is why our rishis have prescribed the observance of Mauna Vrata along with all other important vratas. Vrata means vow. A sincere practitioner of bhajan should not speak unnecessarily. If the need to speak unnecessarily arises, he should definitely remain silent. All talks other than Bhagavat Katha are unnecessary. But it is never unnecessary to speak about topics favorable to bhakti and to Sri Hari. Never unnecessary. It's always necessary. Yes. And anything else other than Bhagavad Gita is unnecessary. So for this reason, devotees should speak only Harikatha and topics favorable for Harikatha. All other topics fall under the category of the urge to speak. One who is able to tolerate the urge to speak is called Dhira, sober. We know that Srila Vaman Maharaj, we heard that recently, how he has a very famous statement. Srila Bharati Maharaj also quoted it. Shunibe Dekibe Shunibe Bolibe Na. Dekibe means I see everything. Shunibe, I hear everything. Bolibe Na, I speak nothing. I do not speak. This was in a certain context that he told this. Now, after the urge to speak comes what? Manasa Vegam. Manasa means the mind. The urge of the mind and the means to control it. Here we come. He's giving us the means to control it. It is the duty of those who are dhira to tolerate the urge of the mind. Unless a person is habituated to controlling the urge of the mind, how can he attentively perform bhajan? How can he attentively perform bhajan? Within the minds of materialists, urges perpetually arise in the form of desires. What arises in the minds of materialists?
Desire. Urges for desiring.
The form, perpetually these urges arise in the minds of materialists in the form of desires. Except for when he is sleeping, the materialist sits on the chariot of his mind, where he busies himself in weaving various schemes. And he never stops. He is never peaceful, even as he sleeps. In the form of good and bad dreams, anxiety never leaves him. To regulate the urge of the mind, the rishis have prescribed Ashtanga Yoga and Raja Yoga. But the Supreme Lord has decreed that the mind should be engaged in tasting a higher rasa, through which it will become detached from lower worldly rasas and thus become regulated. So the rishis in ancient times, they prescribed Ashtanga Yoga, Raja Yoga. But Krishna himself has told in the Bhagavad Gita, Rasovarjam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Experiencing a higher taste, then one can give up the lower taste. By experiencing higher taste. That is the whole principle of bhakti. So, those who have a taste for the path of bhakti can easily regulate their mind. The mind cannot remain without urges. So, if we engage it in thinking about transcendental subject matters, it becomes absorbed in them. And having experienced the rasa of transcendental subjects, the mind is not agitated by material subjects, which are inferior. That's how to control. Now we come to a further explanation of controlling the mind in this section titled Shuddha Bhakti, not yoga, is the topmost method for controlling the mind. Many people think there is no method to regulate the mind other than Ashtanga Yoga. But this is not the case. The mind cannot be regulated through yoga as easily as it can through bhakti. Patanjali Muni also has accepted that, like Ashtanga Yoga, meditation on Ishvara, or the Supreme Lord, which is also called Bhakti Yoga, is a method to regulate the mind. So who is Patanjali? Have you heard of Patanjali? Go ahead. No, I'm asking, so therefore it's appropriate to answer.
Wasn't he the founder of that Ashtanga practice?
Yes. And in the Vedas, there is this system by Patanjali. Patanjali is one of the 6 philosophers of India, 6 philosophical systems. So Patanjali's system of teaching Ashtanga Yoga, which begins with, yama, niyama, asanas, doing asanas, pranayama, and so forth, which in modern day, right, what the yoga studios and all of this, they all are trying to present some variation of Ashtanga Yoga. But how many of them have even reached withdrawing the senses from the sense objects? That's the 4th one on the 8-fold system, you see. Ashtanga means ashta anga, means 8 angas, 8 limbs. So, but the thing is that, see, although people in India, they know that Patanjali Muni is the author of that system of Ashtanga Yoga. So, yes, he has accepted that the system of Ashtanga Yoga, that is the way through which the mind can be regulated. Many people think there is no method to regulate the mind other than Ashtanga Yoga, but this is not the case. So the mind cannot be regulated through yoga as easily as it can through bhakti. So now Bhaktivinoda Thakur is pointing out that the author and the originator of the system of Ashtanga Yoga, Patanjali Muni, he accepts that just as in Ashtanga Yoga practice one can regulate the mind, so he himself has also admitted that meditation, dhyana, on Ishvara, which means, what does Ishvara mean? The Supreme Lord, Ishvara, the Supreme Controller. So meditation on him, or Bhakti Yoga, that's what it is. This is a method to regulate the mind. He's admitted that. The meditation on the Supreme Lord propounded by Patanjali is not pure devotion, Shuddha Bhakti, but rather devotion performed with selfish intent. It is not pure devotion. It's devotion performed with selfish intent, which is called Kamya Bhakti. Bhakti, it's not pure Bhakti. It's filled with other desires. Bhakti performed for the sole purpose of regulating the mind is certainly not the purest form of bhakti, or completely devoid of desires other than to serve Sri Krishna. How can it be? So he's pointing out, okay, yes, there's this system, but it's mixed. It's not pure. It's mixed with other desires. So he says, that perpetual endeavor for the sake of Sri Krishna, Krishna Anushilanam, which is performed exclusively out of loving affection for him, that's called Anukulya Purvaka, exclusive performance out of affection for Krishna. This alone, this is Shuddha Bhakti, pure Bhakti. Therefore, when Shuddha Bhakti is performed, joyfulness awakens in the consciousness of its own accord. And Srimad Bhagavatam 7th canto, 1st chapter, verse 32 states, Tasmat kenapi upayena mana Krishne nishevayet. This means that one should therefore fix the mind on Krishna by any means. So today we were discussing the verse that you've been assigned, and others should also. Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyakshyavagamam Dharmyam Susukam Kartum Avyayam. It is everlasting, and Susukam, it is Kartum, joyfully performed. Here he's telling this, because bhakti is of that nature. That's why Krishna is teaching this in the 9th chapter to Arjuna, which is called the most confidential knowledge. And he's telling there that this knowledge is Raja Vidya. It's the greatest, it's the king of all knowledge. Raja Guhyam, it's the most confidential knowledge. Pavitram idam uttamam, it is the most purifying. Pratyakshyavagamam dharmyam, directly it gives perception, experience, direct experience. Pratyaksha, avagamam dharmyam. This is the perfection of all dharma, because it gives direct perception of the spiritual self. And then Krishna says, Susukam kartam avyayam. It is everlasting and joyfully performed. So this is what Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying here. I'm just winding it up now. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying here how the Ashtanga Yoga process cannot give this. It is a mechanical process. It is not even for this Kali Yuga, but some persons do it. But only bhakti is pure, and because it has pure intention, therefore it gives by its very nature. Bhakti is full of happiness. One time Srila Gurudev said, how did he put it? He said, I'm forgetting how exactly he said it, but he was talking about how it is, he said it's impossible to not be happy if you're performing bhakti. It's impossible to not be happy if you're performing bhakti. Why? Because bhakti is coming from Ladini Shakti of Krishna, the supreme pleasure potency. That's bhakti. Bhakti Devi. So that is full of what? Hladini. Ecstasy. So bhakti is the process through which the mind can be easily controlled. Very difficult by the Patanjali system of Ashtanga Yoga. Very difficult. Practically impossible now. And that's why Arjuna responded in the 6th chapter of Gita to Krishna when he was suggesting. Krishna was suggesting to Arjuna to do this Ashtanga Yoga system. He was explaining it in brief. And then Arjuna said, this seems very difficult to do, like as if you're asking me to control the blowing of the wind. The mind is always very difficult to control. You cannot perform yoga unless your mind is controlled. So that's why this urge of the mind can be easily controlled through bhakti. So just finishing this, therefore he's saying, when Shuddha Bhakti is performed, joyfulness awakens in the consciousness of its own accord. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, Tasmad Kenapyupayena Mana Krishna Nishevayet. Rupa Goswami quotes this in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And that means that one should therefore fix the mind on Krishna by any means. Kenapi upayena. Whatever you need to do in order to fix your mind on Krishna, you should do that. There's so many different methods. So, in this way, by following this instruction and absorbing the mind in the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, the mind very easily becomes regulated and does not wander to other topics. So in this way, through pure Krishna bhakti, the urges of the sadhak's mind are regulated. By carefully meditating on this subject, one can know the inherent differences between yoga and bhakti. There you got it. Okay. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Shri Udesham Ritam ki jai. Jai Bhakti Yoga ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Govinda Jiu Ki Jai. Vancha Kalpatarubyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo.
That's like the $1 million answer.
Answer of what?
How to control the mind.
Yes. Yes. Okay, all of our kirtaniyas have wandered in various directions, so therefore I become the kirtaniya. I'm the, what do you call it?
Designated judge,
Like when you have the default. I'm
The default
yes.
setting. Okay. Jai Shri Gaur Aarti Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Jugal Aarti Ki Jai. Wow. 1 second. Wait, it has to be stopped. You can stop it.
Mama, who's doing the theater?